1. When I, an 18-year-old female, about a year out of high school, started working at a restaurant in a much wealthier community than the working-class one I had grown up in, I started as a hostess, then got promoted to waitstaff. After a while, I started to bond with this girl, Gretchen, also 18, who was a hostess. She relied on me to vent and to share all of her troubles with. Her parents were not nice, only caring about money and social status. I also started hearing about how she was having trouble with infighting and backstabbing among this friend group, many of whom also worked at this restaurant. The restaurant was a place where a lot of young people from the area hung out. I felt bad for her, but I also enjoyed her sense of humor and intellect, and we shared a lot of similar tastes in music and style, so she and I became good friends. At one point, she introduced me to this guy, Chris, 18, that she knew. He and I instantly had chemistry, and I could tell he was very into me. He started coming around the restaurant a lot, sitting in my section, and one day, when Gretchen wasn't there, he asked for my number. It felt like the friends I had always wanted were finally coming together, like my life was about to launch. All of these people lived in their parents' giant opulent mansions in this very upscale town, driving luxury cars their parents gave them, while I would slink back to my broken-down Honda that I'd park in a hidden spot and drive to my family's tiny house in the working-class town, with its broken-down pickup trucks or cement blocks in people's yards, feeling like an alien in both worlds. I was slightly older than some of my new friends, being a year out of high school, while most of them had just graduated, but felt worlds less sophisticated than they appeared to be. Anyway, I didn't really understand why she was so eager to introduce us. Why didn't she want him for herself? He was very cute. It was only later in retrospect that I looked back on the way she introduced us and realized she was using me to bait him to come around the restaurant, so he and I started to hook up. I didn't get why he wanted to be so secret about it at first, but I'll admit that he was about 10 times hotter than any guy I had ever dated, and I let myself get swept up into a mostly physical relationship. He asked me not to tell Gretchen because he could tell she was into him, and although I thought that was silly, as she had introduced us, so obviously if she ever had any romantic feelings for him she was over it, but I reluctantly agreed. Not my proudest moment. Gretchen and I began to hang out more and became BFFs. We began to spend every free moment together. My secret hooking up with Chris felt more and more deceitful, and I cooled it down with him a little. But I was young and didn't know how to handle this situation, and I'm sure I did everything wrong. I thought that I was beginning to fall in love with Chris, but didn't like being a secret hookup, so just sort of let it continue half-assed and in secret. I'll admit this wasn't smart or good. After a while, I got a job in another restaurant, as there was too much drama at that restaurant, and I could make more money at this new place and wanted to go to college. But I continued to hang out with the people I met through the first restaurant. Gretchen and I went Christmas shopping together one day at the mall, and took a break to eat lunch. That's when I accidentally got a glimpse of her Christmas present shopping list as she checked it off. She had high dollar values listed next to the names of all these high-status, wealthy, good-looking, and cool people that I suddenly realized she was desperately trying to become good friends with. $100 here, $200 there, and then there was my name, supposedly her best friend, with $5 listed next to it. It instantly made my heart sink. I don't care about expensive gifts, but it made me realize how little she valued me, with an actual dollar sign to prove it. Nobody owes me anything, but I had already spent over $50 for her Christmas gift, and I felt like a schmuck, realizing we weren't actually best friends and she saw me as someone to spend time with until better people came along. Among the names of her high-value people that she was desperate to become friends with, that she was willing to spend all of her parents' money to try to win over, was Chris, the guy that she introduced me to that I was now seeing. She had $200 next to his name. I began to feel sick to my stomach. I didn't say anything to her, as I probably shouldn't have looked over her list, as it wasn't meant for my eyes. But then something happened that really made my blood boil. She began to tell me how much she was in love with Chris, that she was sure he was her soulmate, and that she thought about him every day, all day. If she had said even a fraction of this to me when she introduced me to him, there's no way I would have hooked up with him. I suddenly felt all kinds of emotions swirling around at once. Why had she withheld this information from me? And why was she telling me this now? I began to realize she had been using me to keep him around. Then she started going on and on about how she spent all night on the phone with him the night before, which I knew was a lie because he was with me. I sat there seething and beginning to hate her, and finally interrupted her to say, "None of that is true. He wasn't on the phone with you last night." She got this look on her face that I will never forget, instant knowing and aware that I not only caught her in her Fantasyland delusional lie, but also knowing why I knew what he did the night before. She just sat there looking into my face, and me looking back at her. I relished the look of hate and betrayal that had come over her face. I gave it right back to her. You could tell that she never expected little, stupid, trashy me to betray her in this way. I was just supposed to be her lapdog, always there for her, but with no needs or wants of my own. Friendship over. She told everyone from the restaurant about what an evil, backstabbing bitch and a man-stealing whore I was, and all my friends from that job stopped contacting me. But you know what? Fuck her and fuck them. As for Chris, he and I stopped being friends with benefits and tried to maintain a platonic friendship after that. But he'd come sniffing around me, asking me to hook up. And I did give in, now and then, hate to admit it, but then eventually we just decided being friends wasn't working. I am now married. This was a few years back. I did Google him recently, and he's also married and living in a very upscale community with his beautiful blonde wife, in a tiny little house, with a view of the San Francisco Bay. Two. My husband and I bought a boat in a storage lot to flip. We spent months of time and buckets of money to fix her up, and we were getting close to being done. The work included painting and rehabbing the mast, the stick that holds the sails, which was being stored in a cradle next to the boat. It was well inside our space, but it did extend beyond the boat itself, a few feet, so we marked it with a neon orange safety cone. Just days after painting the mast, my husband called me from the storage lot with the news that someone had damaged it. Turns out the facility's camera caught the rat trap guy drive right into the mast, knock it into the asphalt, drive over it, stop, then back over it. Naturally, he didn't leave a note, but his truck was easily ID'd and he fessed up when confronted. He didn't want to go through insurance, so we worked up a figure based on us buying used gear, most of it not cheap, to replace what was broken and doing all the work ourselves for free. I think it was less than $1,000, and anyone who knows boats will know what a bargain that was. Even so, he decided to go through insurance after all. The agent who called us needed a quote from a business, not just our scribbled estimate, so I contacted our local cheap boatyard for a DIY quote. They'd just store the mast while we did all the work. That bumped the total up we were seeking to about $2,500. We spent 5 months trying to get the agent to respond, and when he finally did, it was to say they couldn't accept an emailed quote. It had to be an attachment on a letterhead. The rinky-dink yard only sends quotes in the body of emails, because they have 0 forks to give. He all but called us liars and scammers who could have had their buds supply this fake-looking estimate. No, company policy required at least 2 quotes on letterhead to move forward. I confirmed that he would not be able to process our claim without those 2 quotes. Correct. I also confirmed that these yards could be anywhere in the state. Correct. I warned him the new quotes would be significantly higher, but he snidely said that was fine, as long as they were on letterhead. Cue malicious compliance and some fork around and find out. Having worked in the boating industry for most of my life, I knew exactly who to call. the two most respected, i.e. expensive boatyards in the state. These quotes included the yards doing all the work, replacing all damaged gear with new, storage fees, and transportation to and from our storage lot. Both were hundreds of miles away. Unsurprisingly, he called as soon as he got the quotes, asking if he could, pretty please, use the rinky-dink yards quote. "Oh, you can't do that. You might get in trouble since it's company policy, right? We've got to follow all the rules lest someone think we're scammers, right?" He wasn't happy. A week later we got a check for the original quote we scribbled down for the rat trap guy. Guess the agent decided to see if we'd just bend over after he called us liars and cheats. No way. I called our insurance, who got on the line with the other agent and gave him what for. 2 days later, we got a second check for the remainder. I'm sure someone spit on it, but I was happy enough to deposit that $14,000. 3. I'll start this off with saying this is all in good fun, and no one harbors any real resentment from the exchange. That said, let's carry on. A few months ago, I was trying to organize a project for a client that required some special machinery. I was having trouble tracking it down, and was making more calls than a scam center trying to source this fucking thing. Along the line of recommendations I received, I was told to call a guy I know who will call Morty. Morty is a notorious prankster and wild child, and I should have known better. But I like to live dangerously, and I gave him a call. I regretted it immediately. It was late afternoon, and Morty was already hammered, and by the voices in the background, so were his cabal of hooligans he was drinking with. I extracted no useful information from the call, and struggled to get him off the line. Finally, I was able to continue my search. A few minutes after our exchange, I was in another call and received a text. I asked them to hold for a moment and checked it. It was Morty's nipples. I said, "What a scallywag," and returned to my call. Over the next hour, they continued. I received every individual partygoer's nipples, them pretending sausages were their penises, and then one dude sucking on all of their sausages. You get the idea. I was having a laugh, but it quickly got annoying because I was actually waiting for important calls and texts. It was time to end this. I stripped butt naked in my kitchen. I adorned a flowery housecoat my wife has but never uses. I left it untied and opened the front. I put on my World War II Army helmet and then chased my black long-haired cat down and tucked her under my arm. As the cherry on top, or 2 cherries, squeezed out the back, I tucked my junk between my legs to produce the most nausea-inducing ugly woman you've ever seen. If you need reference, think Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs. I then got my wife to take a picture of me. I questioned my decision to send it for a while, until another one of Morty's texts came in. Bombs away. I didn't get a response right away. When I did, it was a simple, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I received no more texts from Morty that night. You may think this was a win for me, but oh no, my friends. I should have thought this out a little better. The next morning, when Morty sobered up, he immediately sent my picture to anyone in his contact list that knew me. Now my boss's wife, co-workers, and damn near anyone I interact with on a semi-regular basis has seen my white pasty body, unkempt bush, and imposter vagina. I got many more "what the fuck is wrong with you" texts that day. Well played, Morty, well played. And I never did track down that fucking machine. 4. Let me take you back to a day in my past at an educational summer camp. Now, dear listener, I could tell you this tale in a few lines, give you a nice chuckle, and let us all move on with our day, but what would be the fun in that? So get ready and strap yourself in for this overly long tale. The setup. I was the stereotypical bookish type, using my breaks to read books rather than making small talk with my classmates and adventuring to hangout spots around the school. However, something, not drugs, was in the air that day, and I decided it was time to take a risk. I had been hearing about the decadent chocolate muffins provided in the recreational center, for a good price too, and had spent the morning math session dreaming of devouring the chocolatey goodness as I read through another chapter of my book. So when our 15-minute break hit, I gathered up all my courage and took my directionally challenged arse to begin the perilous quest of finding this mystical Rec-Sen. Luckily, I quickly realized every other student was also heading there, so I was able to follow them. Unfortunately, in my haste, I left my poor precious book perched atop my desk. I can still hear its pained voice calling out to me as I stumbled down the stairs. "How could you leave me behind like this?" Alas, I could not retrieve it, as I needed to follow the horde of children if I wanted to bless my taste buds with the chocolate muffin I had been craving ever since class had started. I got to the Rec-Sen in one piece. However, squished in the middle of the stampede I was, and somehow found myself at a reasonable spot in line at the snack counter. Now, I won't bore you with the details, but oh stars, holy shit, goodness gracious, dear listener, this muffin far exceeded every one of my expectations. Soft, with big, slightly melted chocolate chunks enveloped in its warm, velvety texture. The muffin itself looked stunning as well, and I could hear the background music playing as I saw the muffin, and everything else disappeared from view. It had an angelic halo and golden glow, and was calling out to me as I stared at it with rose-colored glasses, as the wind blew my bangs back in slow motion, and flowers bloomed across the screen. And the taste, oh, the taste. This muffin was full of all the sugar my young self could ever want. It was moist and soft and would crumble in your mouth, but stayed together beforehand, not making a mess. This muffin was the most perfect baked good I had ever encountered, and I even had a lovely attention-grabbing book to read as I enjoyed the chocolate delight. Was this what heaven was like? After I bought the muffin and re-entered reality, I noticed the other students dispersing around the room, chatting and playing random games. I pitied the poor fool who had to clear up their extravagant mess, but even the wince that accompanied that thought couldn't dampen my mood. My entire life has culminated into this one stunning moment, and I'd be damned if I didn't properly enjoy it. All that was left was to trudge back upstairs to the classroom, retrieve my book, and have the single best moment of my life so far. Unfortunately, it didn't work that way, since all the other kids looked as if they wouldn't leave for a while. I was forced to try finding my own way back upstairs to our classroom, and therefore to my beloved book. Of course, I ended up stumbling around lost for quite a while, and by the time I found my way back to the classroom, half-eaten muffin in hand, the break was already nearing its close. Food was not allowed in the classroom, so I was forced to leave the rest of my perfect chocolate muffin on the table outside as I returned to the room for attendance. Allowing myself only a few forlorn looks back at the muffin, I quickly hurried to my seat and sat down. My teacher had already started attendance, so I sat in my seat quietly and waited to announce my presence. The situation and compliance. "Ollie?" "Here." I tensed up, ready for my name to come next, but it didn't. Instead, she paused as she looked at her attendance sheet and scribbled something by my name. "Oprah?" "Here." What? She skipped me? But no, that didn't make any sense. I was clearly there, sitting in my seat, and she must have seen my name in the alphabetical list. I realized I must have spaced out as she sat back down at her desk, and chatter started up around me. Embodying every bit of the shy, bookish kid trope, I got up slowly and quietly made my way to the teacher's desk. Miss, I think you missed my name on the attendance sheet." She paused her writing and looked up slowly at me. "No, you were tardy, and not in your seat on time, so I marked you as tardy." "What? No way!" The rule here was that if you were 15 minutes or less late to class, you were marked as tardy and got 5 penalty points. How could she mark me as 15 minutes late for being maybe 5 seconds late? I had walked into the classroom before the minute hand turned to the point where the class had started. It wasn't my fault she decided to start attendance early. Well, whatever. If she was going to mark me as late, then so be it. I glanced back up at the clock and went to the desk to pick up my book. Then I started towards the door. Opie, where are you going? Oh, don't worry. I'll be back in 12 minutes. If you're going to mark me down for being 15 minutes late, then I will be 15 minutes late. I feel like I was having my main character moment as her mouth dropped open in shock, but really, what had she expected? I walked out the door, flipped to the correct page in my book, and finally settled down to enjoy the rest of my chocolate muffin. As my plans were finally fulfilled with the bonus of having a smug little feeling about the whole ordeal, and content in the knowledge that there was muffin she could do about it. 5. Several years back, I was in a shitty roommate situation, and found an ad for a room in a house just outside of town, with multiple roommates that I could afford, while still paying for the room in the house I was moving out of, since I couldn't break the lease, but couldn't live there anymore for safety reasons. There were 2 rooms opening up, one where the roommate had moved out amicably, and another where the guy was being kicked out at the end of the month. I had mutual friends with the people still living there, so I thought it'd be a decent fit. The guy who was getting kicked out was apparently being kicked out for fairly petty reasons. He had an elderly dog with breed-related breathing issues, which was apparently loud enough to disturb the other roommates. He had a habit of blocking people into the driveway and didn't wake up to move his car, and despite him leaving keys out for them to move it if needed, it was apparently frustrating enough to want him out. Just little things that could reasonably be worked around from what I heard. But either way, they wanted him out, and I was just moving in, so I didn't have any room to debate it. I worked at a bar, so I often got home between 2 and 4 a.m. As you can imagine, a decently large house outside of town with no streetlights or anything nearby gets pretty dark. So I get home the night after he was officially out, and find that none of the porch lights are on. Kind of odd, but not too alarming. They weren't on timers or anything, so I figured someone just forgot to switch them on. Then I walk inside and try to turn on the lights in the entryway, and they won't turn on. Neither will the ones in the living room, kitchen, hallway, or bathrooms. The guy took all but one light bulb in the entire house. He left the one in my room, and that was it. He took all the toilet paper, paper towels, and dish and hand soap in the whole house. I found out when I ran into him at a bar years later that he had been buying everything like that for the house, and decided to repossess it all when he left. He left my light bulb, since I was too new to the house for him to mess with, and didn't have anything to do with kicking him out. And luckily I had brought some paper products and soap with me in the move. In the moment, it was a little frustrating, but I can't even blame the guy. It was pretty funny and overall harmless PettyRevenge looking back. He did apologize for not considering the fact that the one person the light bulbs would mess with was the person he didn't want to mess with, since I was the only one getting home from work in the wee hours of the night. The rest of the roommates went about 36 hours without realizing there was anything off with the lights situation, until I told them we were out an entire house worth of light bulbs. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 307. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do poke the like button and share the video around with friends and family members. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so for as little as $1 a month on Patreon. And you can get yourself some Hellfreezer merchandise, both of which are linked in the description. You can also make donations during streams and videos like this one. While you don't have to do this, I don't expect you to do this, but I appreciate it, and it does help me out. Alright, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's... Wait, no, we don't move right along. I got an email while I was recording these that someone would like a birthday shout-out, so let's see who it is, shall we? Okay, this is actually a 2-for-1. It goes to Davey on the 15th and Mark on the 16th. Hope you guys are having a great day. Well, great days. I guess since your birthdays are so close together, you can have 2 months to celebrate then, yeah? November. Yeah, you guys can celebrate right through to November. And then give you a few weeks to recover for Christmas. Whatever you're doing, I hope you're having a great time. And before I go, I'd like to sing happy birthday to the pair of you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Davy. Dear Mark. Happy birthday to you. Alright, and before we go, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... when was the last time you had cake on your birthday? Because I'm always telling you guys to have cake on your birthday. But honestly, I think it's been a few years. There's nothing stopping me. I could make one, I could buy one. I've just not really bothered the past maybe 2-3 years, possibly. Is that a normal thing as you get older, or is it just a me thing? Let me know what you think in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.